Meanwhile, the Chinese currency is growing stronger with each passing day. As the world dumps the US dollar, more and more countries are turning to the Chinese yuan. Last week, it was Brazil. It began bilateral trade in the yuan, and now Malaysia has announced its plans. Malaysia wants to set up an Asian monetary fund. Malaysia's Prime Minister is Anwar Ibrahim. He met with Chinese President Xi Jinping last week. Both leaders were in Hainan. Ibrahim informed his parliament about the discussions. He said he was the one who pushed for this idea. And I have some quotes from the Malaysian Prime Minister. When I had a meeting with President Xi Jinping, he immediately said, I refer to Anwar's proposal on the Asian Monetary Fund, and he welcomed discussions. There is no reason for Malaysia to continue depending on the dollar. So Malaysia wants an Asian Monetary Fund, and China supports the idea. But what purpose will it serve? It has two goals. Number one, replace the US dollar with an alternative currency. And number two, reduce reliance on the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, the lender of last resort for countries. The IMF bails out countries in economic distress. China and Malaysia want to build an alternative to the IMF. They want to kill two birds with one stone, create an Asian IMF and curb dependence on the US dollar. And in both ways, they challenge the United States. Because the US dollar is still the dominant global currency and the US government still has an outsized influence on the IMF, which also explains why China is interested in the project. Although it's not really a new idea, it was first proposed by Japan back in the 1990s. This was during the Asian financial crisis. Asian economies were under considerable stress then. There was a series of currency devaluations. It began with Thailand. It spread to Malaysia, the Philippines, Indonesia, even South Korea, which was this close to a government default. The IMF bailed them out, but it also imposed very tough conditions. There was a lot of discontent among Asian nations. They thought some of the IMF's demands were unfair, and that's when the idea of an Asian monetary fund was born. It was supposed to be a counter to the IMF, an institution to help Asian countries overcome financial challenges. But the idea never really took off. The proposal led to disagreements between Japan and the US. The US pushed back hard against the idea. No prizes for guessing why. The Asian Monetary Fund would have challenged the IMF. It would have weakened the American influence in Asia. So the Americans were not in favor of it. As for China, it was reluctant. It did not want to back Japan's proposal. So the plan was DOA, dead on arrival. But today it is being revived, and in very different circumstances. The American influence on the world is on the decline, and China is no longer a reluctant power. It wants to challenge American hegemony, and it's not shy of wielding its currency, the yuan, as a weapon. The war in Ukraine has also helped. It has contributed to the rise of the yuan. In Russia, for instance, the Chinese currency has already replaced the dollar. The yuan is now the most traded currency in Russia. Most of Russia's financial assets are now held in yuan. Earlier this year, Russia's finance ministry converted its assets. It developed a new structure for Russia's National Wealth Fund. And this fund now holds 60% of its assets in the Chinese yuan. The Bank of Russia is Russia's central bank, and it likes the yuan. The Russian bank now regularly advises citizens and companies to convert their assets, to move away from the US dollar and to switch to either the ruble or other friendly currencies like the yuan. That's the term they use, friendly currencies. So Russia is shifting. So are some ASEAN countries like Indonesia, Vietnam, and Cambodia. They're ditching the dollar. They're settling trade in local currencies. The trend is quite clear. The Chinese yuan is going places and it's finding takers. The American dollar is losing friends.